Hello, everyone, and welcome to Claris Community Live. Today, we have assembled a panel of partners to dive into semantic search with FileMaker 2024. And to kick us off with our introductions, let me hand it over to Ronnie Rios.
Hello, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ronnie Rios. I'm one of the product managers here at Claris. Really excited to be here. This is a great topic. I think most of you know how excited about AI in general I am, and semantic search is one of those things that really excites me. As I said it many times, including at our keynote at Engage. For those of you who don't know, semantic search allows you to perform finds within data along the lines of the context of the meaning of those things. So it is a quintessential part of AI and generative AI as we know it today. Just a quick kickoff here about we do have a poll here that will show up here in WebEx. So we really wanted to since we'll be talking about this topic, we really want to understand kind of where you are on your own AI journey and around semantic search. So I would be very, very helpful for all of us to understand a little bit more about where you are if you would take a minute or two to answer the questions in the poll. So with that, back to you.
All right. And Ian, why don't you kick us off with a brief introduction while we wait for the poll to complete?
Sure. Hi, I'm Ian Jempson. I'm with Transforming Digital, based in London in England. My AI journey started about 5 or 6 years ago when I wrote a master's dissertation, and I had a lot of research. I had about a dozen interviews with people, and I was looking for better ways to analyze this data. And I built a system in FileMaker, and what I've found since then is that what's happened in AI has enabled me to do that kind of thing much better. So I've been working on a product to help with that kind of research.
Thank you. And Will, what about you?
I've been with Beeswax Data Tools for, I think, 18 years now, but I've only been working with AI and semantic search since Claris Engage this year in February. So I've just been trying to catch up, and I'm super excited about it, everything that it has to offer, and I've already started to sprinkle it into one of my production apps. So very cool.
That's very cool. And Mike, what about you?
Yeah, Mike Wallace with Empowered Data Solutions, and I've been working with AI now for I don't know, a year or so, maybe a little bit longer if you go back to coding type things. But yeah, I've really dug in like a tick, man. Watch videos all the time, something like that. So looking forward to doing more and more with it.
All right. Well, thank you all. And thank you for completing the poll. There's about a minute left on the poll. I guess we ended it. I'm just looking quickly at the results, and let me share the results with people. Let's see if people can see it. Polling is still something of a mystery to me. But it looks like we are generally in a group of people who have little to no familiarity with semantic search, and I will definitely put myself in that category, who have not yet played with it in FileMaker but want to. Half the respondents answered that. And again, about half of respondents have not done any work with any AI using old or new methods, and a few have started to integrate AI into their FileMaker apps. So with that, Ronnie, why don't you get started by just giving us an overview of the features in FileMaker 2024 and why we started with semantic search.
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody's been talking about AI lately, obviously, right? We've got a lot of chatter around artificial intelligence, AI is not new. It's been around, right? As a branch of the science has been around for many decades, but obviously with the advent of generative AI, right, it's kind of a new breath, and especially with large language models. Now, one of the things that has been also highlighted is the ability to bring context, bring information to those large language models so that they know what they're talking about, right? Because they're only trained on a set of data. In order to give it context about things about like your business, or things of what you want to bring it relevant data. And this is where semantic search comes into play. And this is really why, again, it's not new, but again, it's a kind of been brought up to the spotlight because of all these other technologies. And so with FileMaker 2024, we introduced a series of script steps and functions that allows us as developers to bring in vector embeddings, which is the cornerstone of semantic search, and then be able to then take those vector embeddings and be able to find other instances of those vector embeddings that are similar to that in context. And so what that allows us to do is, I'll share my screen really quick, allows us to do some really interesting things. So once I've got, say for example, I've got all these images here on my computer. Unless you've written any captions regarding these images, and normally you would have to write those manually. Now with the tools that we have today with AI and semantic search, I can do things like, I don't know, type in here, winter, and it'll be able to search for things and find images that are related to the things that I'm looking for by the semantic meaning, right? What is the meaning behind those things? And I can take this even a step further and do things like, let's say here we're going to be looking for, I don't know, move these things here, white sneakers that customers don't like. And what this is doing is taking this particular phrase over here, converting it into a vector embedding, and then comparing that to the vector embeddings of each one of the ones that are inside of all of these records. And the amazing thing about it is that by doing so, it'll find the ones that are closest in context and meaning to what I just wrote here, so bring in more relevant information. And here I'm actually doing two things. Not only are we doing semantic search here, but I'm comparing here what it would mean to do semantic search on just plain fields, which is what's doing here on the left. And you'll see that it does find sneakers, but you'll see that the ratings are fairly high, or 5 is the maximum. But here on the right side, it did a much better job because the ratings are here a lot lower, and because it's searching what I wrote here, my search criteria, against kind of this phrase that's over here. And so from a context, from a meaning standpoint, these are a lot closer than were just the simple keyword search, if you will, on those things. So this and a lot of other really amazing things gets unlocked by semantic search and the features that we brought into FileMaker. So you now can do all these things natively within your applications and not have to rely on third-party tools and storage in other places. And this is why I'm so excited. I'm excited to have these people here who are already been playing with these and are looking at different use cases and how they can bring these new feature set into their applications. So hope that helps a little bit.
I hope so. And just before I turn things over to the panel, just want to remind everyone, please feel free to engage in the chat. If you have questions, I will interrupt our speakers and ask questions. And also, when you use chat, please send it to everyone. That's really important. That way everybody can see it and will answer. And in fact, Ronnie, quick question for you. Can the photo analysis be used to identify duplicate photos?
Yes. There are better ways to analyze photos like they're completely identical, but it can absolutely be used to find photos that are very, very similar, because the similarity index between these two photos will be very, very high. So the higher they are, the more similar they are in context. So two photos that have a very high correlation, in our case, we use a cosine similarity, that have a cosine similarity very high, close to 1, means that they are very, very, very similar. So yeah, absolutely. And you can do the opposite, by the way. Another great use case for semantic search is to find outliers, things that are not like the others. So if you wanted to find a photo that, or an entry in a log that is kind of troubling, right? It doesn't seem like normal, you can search for the opposite, right? Something in the negative values.
All right. Well, thank you. I guess now let me turn it over to the panel and just briefly, before we move into some of your demos, can you tell us all, like, what's one thing that excites you about semantic search in FileMaker? Could be really specific, could be general, but like, what are you looking forward to using and rolling out to your customers? And let's start with Mike this time.
I think that one of the best things I've seen with this is being able to find data. I mean, it's not just finding data in different ways, but matching data differently. For example, two big chunks of information, these records are, you will find that they're similar to each other, not just this field and this field or these sets of fields, but there's a lot more that you can do. For example, it will find a similarity where 3 out of 5 fields are the same, but 2 are different. Where if you do a relationship, it's not going to find it because those 2 that are different. So the similarity helps you do more fuzzy matching and things like that.
What about you, Ian?
Well, I mean, the big thing for me initially was that I'm going to be able to do semantic search in my favorite development environment without needing to move outside. So I'm loving that. But I think some of the non-obvious things, like Mike said, because you're able to find a similarity between things, that means we can use it for things like categorizing things. Say my example I'll show in a few minutes will be hotel reviews, where it can categorize hotel reviews. But the beauty of this approach is, unlike if you're using a large language model, that this doesn't hallucinate because it's going to be classifying things close to existing data. So it avoids the whole problem of hallucinations and made up data. So that's one of the things I really love about it.
What about you, Will?
Yeah, I often have a one or more fields in records that have just huge blobs of text. And it's just, as the number of records grows, it's very hard to remember what wording we used when we input those records. So I'm very excited about users being able to find records without having to recall exactly how those records were worded, either by themselves or by other users.
Oh, those are all I'm already thinking about my past life running a big database and how I would solve problems, especially like that with different wordings, because everybody phrases things differently, even when you're trying to all have the same meaning. So there's a couple people wanting to know, just generally, how do you set this up and how do you use it? So I guess let's jump into your demos.
Love to see it.
So who wants to start?
I could quickly show the backend configuration part of it, because that part of it is super simple. Depending on how you do it, there might be basically just like 3 touch points for your app.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let me open up an example here. Okay, so for semantic search, we have 3 basic components. The first is we have to configure our app to talk to an AI model. So in this example, I'll be configuring it to talk to an OpenAI model. The second is we have to build the embeddings of the data that we want to search on. And then the third is we perform the search. So in this example, I've done each of those 3 things, each in their own discrete script step. So the first, we have a new script step called configure AI account. And this will take as its parameters an AI account name, and expose those here. So I have some account with OpenAI called Beeswax Testing. It's going to ask for which is the model provider. In this case, I've chosen OpenAI. And what is your AI API key? That's going to be something that is unique to your account that you're going to authenticate with. And once you've configured this and executed this script step, like I've done with my on first window open script, it's going to remember that for the entire session. So basically, any user that's going to be interacting with AI, you'll need to configure this at the earliest possible point where you need it. So next, for the embeddings, we have a new script set called insert embedding in found set. And we're going to, in this case, I ran it across these 500 records. And for each record, it uses that account. It uses whichever, excuse me, whichever model I configured. And it says, which field do you want to build the embedding on? This app only has one data field and it has all these strings of text. And then it puts an embedding of that string into, in this case, a container field. And then finally, we have something called perform semantic find, which is a new script step. And you can say something like search all the records in this table. You could also say search just my current found set and search this embedding container field that I built in the previous script step, or sorry, the previous script. And how many records do I want to return? You can also control like the quality of the records you want to return. Like you want to set some threshold for how good those results need to be. So with those 3 steps, this one you only run once when the user first opens the app. This or some variation of this, you would have to run when you first initialize your data, but also as your data changes or as records are created, you need a strategy to keep that embedding up to date for those records. And then this is the one that will be executed by the user. So in this case, I've got a little search bar up here, and I can search for something like animals with stripes. So it finds, I told it to find all 500 records. So it found all 500 records, but it is floating to the top. This is like one of the coolest things about semantic search. It floats to the top the best results based on this cosine similarity field. So it says, okay, a zebra has stripes. So I'm gonna give that an 85% similarity to this particular search term. And then you can see that these results degrade as I go down the list. So doing each of these things, you know, there are complexities to these, ways to make them stronger or more useful or more tuned to your app. But it's basically as simple as just employing those script steps.
That was great, Will. I think because I've had a couple of questions here in the chat about, you know, kind of where can you get these the embeddings? Do you have to send your data to a third party? And I think it'd be good to mention that while, for example, we'll set this up to talk directly with OpenAI using their embedding models, you could host these models locally if you want to. And we even provide, with FileMaker 2024, provide a Python script that allows you to run these locally on a server of your choosing. And so you could run these locally using that software or any other software as well that follows that API. And commercially, we did include OpenAI, and the plan is to add other providers there as well to make it a lot easier for you.
And yes, and I just want to bring back one point that Chris made way back in our first session on AI. And that is that when you're talking to OpenAI with the API and not interacting in the ChatGPT app, your data is not retained by the model. Yeah. So yes, you are sending it out, but it's not being stored or used to train future models. I'm just looking to
one question here. Yeah, just looking at some of the questions here. One question real quick before I continue. how do you delete or recreate these vector indexes? They're not indexes per se, like regular find indexes in FileMaker. It is data you store in either in a container field. If you can choose to store these in binary format in a container field, or you can store them as text. So you can have a text field and store them there. Binary in a container field is much more efficient and requires less storage space. So we highly recommend that you use that, but you might have vector embeddings that you've gotten elsewhere and it's still in text format. And then you can, with the tools that we've built into FileMaker 2024, you can actually convert those from text to binary back and forth. So give you the flexibility to choose how you want them. But they get stored in fields, and you're literally doing a search within that field. And so we've made it as easy as possible to have semantic search and handle vector embeddings here. Hope that answers the question, Hans.
Yes. And I guess why don't we next go to Ian for a demo? I know you mentioned record classification. So how are you doing that in your demo?
Okay, so right, what I've done is I've imported a set of TripAdvisor hotel reviews. So I've got about 20,000 of them imported and generated embeddings, and you can see they've all got a rating on them. And so in this case, I'm going to show a couple of things. First, I'm going to show what everyone's been discussing in general in terms of semantic search, looking for similarity. So I could say this hotel was terrible. And then if I perform my search, you can see that I'm getting back a list of reviews that are rated 1. They're all look like horrible places to stay. I should say that in this case, I'm not using OpenAI. I'm running an embedding server locally on my own network. So this is an example. But one thing to note here is that with 20,000 records, the performance is quite good. That it's pretty close. So if I say hotel was wonderful, and search again, then we should see much better reviews. Yeah. So that basically shows kind of, and that's done the same way that Will showed you behind the scenes. But the other thing I wanted to show was that if, for example, we have a bunch of other reviews that we imported, and we don't have classifications for them yet, that what we can do is we can script the process to basically import them. So I've imported these from Excel, and I'll have a look at, I say chart. What this has done is that it's imported them. It's done a semantic match on them to find the closest values, and it's matched them up against existing reviews. So it's kind of automatically classified these reviews. And if I were to go in through and manually sort through 390 reviews to classify them, I expect it would take me quite a while. Whereas to do it automatically here, the process might take maybe a minute or so. And then it flags up which ones do we need to look at. So I thought that was a nice use.
It's fantastic.
Now, the other thing that I'm going to show you, and you guys are all the first people to see this, is that I've started porting a product I've been working on from a web-based system to FileMaker. And what this does is this allows us to import meetings, and we can basically look at meetings, load videos. This is very much a still prototype stage in FileMaker, but we've got the transcripts of the meetings. We've done embeddings on the transcripts, and then we can perform analysis on that. So if I looked at, for doing research, I could say, for example, these are themes that I'm interested in my data. And so about, say, the deployment, how do we deploy AI models? That then does a semantic search, and it finds out of all my interviews, all the places where people talked about deploying deploying models. So that's just sort of a really quick example of that. So anyway, yeah, that's so I'm really quite happy with the way this is coming out. And if anybody wants to try it out, it's going to be ready in about 2 weeks for people to actually get their hands on and try. So just get in touch if you'd like to.
Oh, that's fantastic, Ian. That's a great use case.
Yeah, and Ian, if you can just drop your contact information in the chat so people can get in touch with you, that would be super helpful. And I think we had one specific question for you, and that is, what model are you using on your local server?
Basically, it supports different models, and if you bear with me 1 second, that is running. Sorry. That's using the all mini LM and L12 V2 model, but it also supports the MX BAI large embedding model. So I've supported different models for different purposes. In some cases, you just need to search quickly. And so a really small model enables us to search more quickly. And in other cases, we might need to search specific topics, and then a model that's designed to work with those types of topics will be better.
Yep. I think it's good to mention also that certain models are trained against different languages. So if you need to support different languages, you're going to want to look for a model that's trained in those languages, right? So if it's just English, right, you'll find those. But if you want to do things that, if you've got, say, documents like Ian has, maybe you've got meetings, you have an international company, you've got meetings happening in English, Spanish, French, then you're going to want an embedding model that supports those languages. So
just to add one more thing to that, the example that Ronnie showed early on with the images, that was using what's referred to as a multimodal model. So some models can work with text and images together.
Yep.
And finally, Mike, I know you've shared your demo file for free in the marketplace, and I saw that you published a blog just last week with kind of a deep dive under the hood. So do you want to show us what you've been doing? And also, I know when you previewed it, you've been doing visualizations also using vector embeddings, and I think that's super interesting.
Okay. Sure, let me show, make sure I'm showing the right file here. All right. So yeah, this is the demo file, and it is on the marketplace, and it does also have in there the same video walkthrough that you were talking about, to be able to go through the file and give you more information about it. It has some basic chat functionality, as well as I have both ways of doing the embedding and semantic search via Pinecone and interacting with the APIs there, as well as doing it with the new 2024 functionality here. So so all of that is in the demo file and in that video. And for example, like if I wanted to do so for example, if I wanted to Southern barbecue cookbook, if I search for that with the embedding here, then it will, this is an M3 max that I'm working on here, and my server's an M1. So that does bring up the point that making sure that you have good quality hardware is going to be more and more important as you're running these things, whether you're running the semantic search or you're running your own model on hardware or whatever. But as you see, it found 50 records, which is what I told it to return, and it has the similarity here, so you can flip through and see which records are similar, etc. One thing that is important to remember when you're doing this is that whatever model you're using to embed the data, you need to make sure that you use that same model whenever you're doing your semantic search. Otherwise, it's not going to work. You'll get really weird results, and you're kind of figure out, well, this is broken. It doesn't work at all. So someone was saying, I believe it was Richard Carlton, he was talking about how that a lot of this is just smart math, and the actual semantic search part it is just a lot of math. The AI part of it is actually in the embedding. So it's taking a smart machine to take this text information here and turn it into numbers that represent the meaning. And so that actual embedding part is what you need the AI for in order to make this work. After that, we're just comparing a whole bunch of numbers with a whole bunch of math. This is a new functionality. Actually, before I jump into this, I just wanted to touch base on some general use cases that are a little more outside the box. With, for example, I have a nonprofit that I work with that works with homeless, and we're using the semantic search there to start looking at matching homeless people with a lot of survey questions that they fill out with agencies with the surveys that they fill out to find out what are good matches. In other words, this person struggles with addictions or whatever, and here's the different things that they've answered this way. What are good agencies that we could lean them towards, or in order to help them get away from being homeless, that kind of thing. And then another one of my customers were working on using semantic search. They're actually very interesting company called Scan Mailboxes. And the reason why I started signing here is because the whole company is deaf. The owners and all the employees are deaf, and so hello, Scan Mailboxes. But we're using that. They actually have a virtual mailbox solution where their customers log in and they can see all their mail that gets delivered to them. And we're going to be implementing semantic search there so the customers can find not only the envelope and that kind of stuff, but the contents of the mail. I got this bill from, I remember it was about this amount or something like that, and they can search their mail that way with semantic search. So that's going to be interesting for just search. This is something I just added. This is not in the demo yet, but it is something that will be in my next release. And I'm just in this, I added where you can add a star rating to different books within the 105,000 books that I have here. And the reason why I did that is because I'm doing a semantic search across all of these books that you indicated that you like or don't like, and finding books that are like that, but that are weighted. So this set of results is actually weighted. It's weighted so that the records that let's see if I can be clear about this. Basically your preference. So in other words, I like this book, I like this book, I like this book. Okay, and I don't like this book, and I don't like this book. So I average how does this particular book that I'm looking at here match with all these books that you reviewed, weighted by how much you like the books, and that gives you, like, this is a 97%. I'm showing my geekness here by some different the books that I picked here, but so you can see that as I'm flipping through, the semantic similarity that is shown here is actually how similar is this book to books that I like in this list. And so if I flip all the way like to the end here, I said, for example, that I don't like Catcher in the Rye because I just picked that. And there's I said I don't like JavaScript HTML books. And so you'll find, these are negative 66%, meaning that it's really not like what I like. So this is just a way that you can, just a single semantic search isn't necessarily all you can do with it. So this is a combined semantic search where I'm combining all of the searches for all these different books here and coming up with a way to find a recommendation for books that I think that the person will like based on how they ranked these. So that will be in the next release of this demo file. And I think I've taken up enough time. So
Well, that's great, Mike. That's really cool. So you basically built a personalized recommendation system, right, for all the books, which is fantastic. It's really cool.
Yes, and I think we have had a few more questions come in. And Mike, if you want to stop sharing,
stop
please. Thank you. And I think Ronnie, do you want to go back to Hans's question?
Yeah.
And also there's another question in the Q&A about kind of like, I think people are thinking like, if I'm searching a container field, when I perform the semantic find, how does that work? Like what's happening under the hood in FileMaker?
I think it'd be best if I showed it instead. And so I
All
explain
right.
it. So let me see if I let me share my screen real quick, and I'll show you another example here of things you can do with semantic search. And those who are at Engage saw this. I demoed this application with a pre-release version of FileMaker. And so what this has here, this is just a list. These are just container fields, right? This is records with different files in them. I can pose a question, like for example, which AI-related script steps were released in FileMaker 2024. And when I click the submit button, what it's going to do is going to take that question, it's going to create a vector embedding, and it's going to search through all of these documents and see which one of these documents has any relevant information regarding that question. And I'll take that piece of information, send it to an LLM, to then answer the question, right? So this is the answer to that question, and it came from the FileMaker Pro 21 release notes, right? So you can even identify that. What's happening under the hood is each one of these files that I've brought into this has gone through what Will showed earlier and created those vector embeddings. And the vector embeddings looks like this. It's this container field over here for each one of them. So I've got 144 little segments or chunks out of 24 documents. I've split those documents into smaller chunks, right? Because the embeddings model have a context window. You can't throw them, 5 megabytes of data. Each one of them has their own size limit. So you're going to want to cut these files into chunks of information that will fit that model. And so in this case, I've got 144 little chunks of data. This is what that piece of chunk, right, of that file looks like. And then I've sent it to the model. The model returned something that I'm storing here as a file in a container field. So when I'm performing the search, the perform semantic find, I'm letting it know, it's like, hey, I want to search for, I'm looking for things that are stored here in this vector container field. So I'm not using this text, I'm using what's stored in here. So that container field has that numerical representation of the meaning of what's in this text. It's the meaning. We're looking for that semantic value, right? What is it talking about? Not necessarily the keywords that are in here, not necessarily Claris, not necessarily database or service, but what is the meaning of that? And so all that meaning and context is stored into these container fields. So again, when you're performing the search, you say, hey, here's my new vector, right? Which in this case was this question. I'm going to convert that into another binary and say, hey, search against this field in these records, in these 144 records, and it will return a list of those records that are similar in value and semantic value to that original query. And so that's how it gets stored, and that's how you kind of use it. So I hope that answers a couple of questions that I saw there in the chat, running the chat, and I hope that makes a little bit more sense as far as storage and how that gets utilized.
Yeah, and I think the only other question is really about how much weight or space does storing those embeddings add to your file?
I think, yeah, Ian has done some really great testing on it, but I'll preempt to say that it depends on the model, depends on how deep the different models have different weights on how detailed you can create them. And so the bigger they are, right, the bigger the storage requirement. And then, right, so when you store them in FileMaker, though, again, you can store them as text or as a container. If you store them as a container, they will take less space. But Ian, I know you've done some testing around this. What did you find?
Yeah, I'll just share my
On
screen.
the spot. But I know we
Sorry,
can
I'm just going to share my screen again really, really briefly. And
Yeah, go right ahead.
okay, this is the slide from my .fmp presentation where I looked at how much space embeddings would take up. And so I took a chunk of text that was 65 characters in length, and then and looked at the length of the text embedding generated by OpenAI. And so the large OpenAI model gave about 39,000 characters roughly. And in terms of size, if you had 100,000 records, that's going to take up 3.8 gigabytes. That's stored as text. And as you discussed, basically, this should be stored in containers. And if you store them in container fields, the same thing takes up quite a bit less space. It takes up 2.4 gigabytes instead of 3.8. One other really, really important point to make is that if you do store your embeddings in text, make certain that you do not index that field. You do not want to index that field, or you will destroy your database's performance as it tries to index that live. So embeddings do take up a lot of space, and we do need to think about how they're stored. So yeah, that's just a really quick overview of that topic.
Oh, good question from Matt. Well, and also from Josh about that storage. Why do containers take up less space? And then with those containers, do you want to store them internal, external, or secure?
In terms of, okay, I'll touch on Matt's question first. If you store it externally, apparently that does work, but it is going to slow down the database performance because the server needs to look externally. And I would expect that secure storage is only going to worsen that. So for best performance, you'd want to store them internally, but this means we also need to think about how do we store them, that we want to store them in a separate table. We don't want to store them in the same table as our underlying data. Otherwise that will kind of bloat our database even more. So we might potentially want to store them in a separate file with maybe a different backup strategy. And as to why storing as a container field saves space, I don't have a really good answer for that. Ronnie might have more insight than I do.
And the reason is it's stored in a binary format. So compared to text, where we've got store a lot more detail about it, we store binary. It's just much more efficient. So, which is one of the reasons why we're supporting both of them. When you talk to an API, so let's say you're talking to OpenAI and you're getting that embedding back, you're getting an array of numbers. It's text, right? You're getting a JSON object. So you're getting text back. And so in order to kind of make things a little bit more efficient, so you don't have to store that as text and bloat too much your file, we support both that text version of it, but you can also convert it into a binary format, put it into a container field, and then just use that, which is what most of us here are using, right? So it's storing that as a binary format. Yeah.
Thanks. I think we've kind of gone as deep as we can without an engineer on hand.
Yeah,
to kind of talk about how this is all working under the hood. And so with that, I just want to shift gears a little bit and ask all of you, what are some examples of projects you're already implementing? I know, Mike, you talked about matching homeless person's needs to service organizations effectively. And Will, at the top, you said you had already started to put semantic search into some of your internal production apps. So I'd love to hear what you're doing there.
So I have an example right now where it has to do with job applications. So if we have various positions open and there are resumes coming in, we might have a philosophy that says this candidate is applying for this position. It might be easy enough to evaluate whether they do or do not meet the criteria for that position. But we also want to somehow be sensitive to, like, well, they might be qualified for other positions. So even though we don't necessarily want to slot them into position A, we might want to consider them for position B, just to try to leverage whatever talent they're bringing. So I've got this example here.
It's very interesting.
This file has two different data types. One are the resumes, that's what you see on the left, and one are the positions, that's what you see on the right. So this isn't semantic search per se, but it is using the vector embeddings, and it's using the cosine similarity to perform basically like a high level analysis. And this is similar to what we saw in some of Ian and Michael's examples, where for any one resume here, it looks at the vector embedding of that person's resume, and it just compares it and says, well, I think that person is a good fit for the appraiser role. And we can see the number itself, the cosine similarity itself, is not particularly meaningful, but what's meaningful is just how those numbers change over time, so that we can see that they are particularly well suited to this appraiser role, much less so to broker. And then we can see it gets worse and worse as this goes down. And if we pick on a different record here, we can see, okay, this person has a higher level similarity with several roles here at the top, but nothing is particularly standing out, and so on. So basically, like from the perspective of a resume, we can start to have the cosine similarity suggest to us which roles or which positions we might want to consider this applicant for. And then we can flip it around and say, for any one position, given our pool of candidates, who are the candidates we should look at first? Who should we prioritize considering for this role? So we can see for the role of appraiser, even though before we might have thought of the Hannah Ward application as good from Hannah Ward's perspective, when we flip over here, we can see like, oh, but there's actually somebody named Connor Bailey who is, has a much higher cosine similarity to this particular position. So I'm just so interested in how the semantic search, or in this case, it's not even doing a search, it's just running an analysis to compare records. I'm very interested in how FileMaker can now help us see the relationship between data, to help us build like join records to say that these two things are related to each other, or it can surface to us things that might merit our attention based on whatever criteria we've built into what goes into that cosine similarity.
That's fantastic. Oh, I like that. Yeah, they're using it for ranking. And just to, right, in that case, like when I was showing like my demos, or when I write there, I have to create a vector embedding at that moment in time because that's brand new. Correct me if I'm wrong, like what you have here, like all the embeddings there are already created. You're just going through them and just comparing them. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, and that's
pretty...
part of what helps it be even faster than the semantic search itself, is that everything is already done. It's not making any more calls to the AI at that point.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a great use case. And I think it expands beyond like just resumes and positions. Anything that has some sort of relationship, right, between two types of entities can benefit from this type of analysis and ranking. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a great use case.
Yeah, I think one of you already mentioned that scenario of like deduplication. I'm also very interested in that. Yeah. Like when somebody goes to create a record, or just we want to be able to review batches of records that are very similar, so that can perhaps collapse them. Semantic search or just a cosine similarity can help us identify that overlap.
Yeah, that's a great, yeah.
Yeah, Ian, any applications that you're working on for clients or for prototype purposes?
Yeah, this is one that I've not got anything I can show you or demo, but I'm really, really excited about this one. We've got a music company here in London, and they do music for advertisements. So they have I think 20,000 files on Amazon S3 of music that they've created, ranging from a few seconds in length to a couple of minutes in length. And what we're currently working on is, can we build a semantic search so someone can say, I've got this song and it's almost right, but not quite right. Can you find me all the songs that are similar to it? And so that's what we're currently prototyping and trying to build right now. So I'm really hoping we get it working, because I think it's just super cool.
That is fantastic, right?
And as a musician, I'm like, what are the similarities you're looking at?
I don't know, to be honest. That's the thing. Essentially, it's producing this giant vector of numbers, and then it's saying that they're similar. So
That's fascinating.
That is really cool.
I hope it works.
So do I.
And we just have a few minutes left. So I think to wrap up, this is for, everybody. As you're thinking of what you're doing, what steps are you taking when you implement? I mean, how are you thinking about safety, data protection, which we've already touched on a little bit, and cost, and weighing those options to build both efficient and effective systems that will have a return on investment? Because of course you don't want to spend thousands of dollars building embeddings if you're not going to get any value from them.
Well, one thing on the cost of the embeddings, if you spin up your own AI on your server, obviously there's just the cost of you doing the implementation, because you're not going to charge yourself for your embeddings. But even the like I just to give you some kind of idea, doing my testing, I figured out that I've embedded equal to I think it was 19 sets of 30 volumes of Britannica, Encyclopedia Britannica, for about $15. So the cost is really not high in doing the embeddings. And of course, the semantic search is not, there's no cost in that, because it's just, other than very, very minimal, when you do a semantic search, you are embedding whatever you're searching, that search phrase, sending that up, that one little embedding, come back down, and then you compare it to what you embedded previously. So the cost is very minimal as far as this goes. And as far as the data, as we mentioned before, when you're sending the information up, obviously you're using secure channels to send that information to have it embedded if you are sending it to OpenAI or something like that, and they're not storing or training on any of that data. So your data is still secure, because you're using SSL and everything like that in order to, or secure methods in order to send the data. But I don't know if somebody else has more to add to that.
And as Ian said, you still can run these locally. Like if you want to add that extra layer of privacy and security, you absolutely can. Like Ian mentioned, he's running his model locally on his own network, and so you can add that in. I think the great thing about the way we implemented here, the features, is it'll work with either or, and it doesn't matter. You can mix and match those things as well. Right there, you have the ability to mix and match depending on your particular needs and what resources you have available. I hope that comes through. That comes through. That we're giving you as many options as we can.
Yeah, and I guess, Ronnie, just to wrap up, well, first, thank you everybody for joining us, both the panelists and all the attendees who asked great questions. Please join us in Claris Community to continue the conversation. We do have the Claris AI topic. And if you haven't seen it, we've just opened a closing poll just to get a sense of, did you find this session helpful? Are you more confident that you're to go off now and start testing and playing around with semantic search in the latest version of FileMaker? And I guess, Ronnie, just to wrap up at the end, can you give us a few thoughts on how Claris is ensuring ethical AI?
Sure. You know, as we often say, we are an Apple company, and as such, we take privacy and security very, very seriously. It is ingrained in everything we do. It's not an afterthought. So I think the way we implemented this feature and every other feature that in the platform, especially around AI, I think it's very important for us to keep that in mind. So once again, we're giving you all the options for you to implement these in whichever way that makes more sense for you from a privacy and security standpoint. We don't use your data, never comes to us. And even if it did, we would never use that to train models or in another way that would not be disclosed to you. So we're always making sure that we do this in a customer-centric way, making sure that we uphold the highest standards of privacy and security. Again, it's part of the family and the way we're built. These things come first in everything that we do. So yeah, I think that's about it.
All right. Well, once again, thank you, everyone. And please join us next week, where we'll be joined by Jasper from Listerius, and both Sangeeta and Doug from Claris's PM team to talk about FileMaker Server and go deep on the new security features that we've brought to FileMaker Server with the 2024 release. So have a great rest of your day, great weekend, and I hope to see you back next week.